My strongest recollection of that September afternoon includes the clean smell of heat. The smell that's unique to Northern California, that's a mixture of chapparel and dust with a little bit of campfire mixed in. As a newly ordained 27-year-old, at my first Bishop's Ranch clergy retreat, David Forbes in cutoff jeans was the first person to greet me. Yeah, those cutoff jeans make us laugh, don't they? He already knew my name before I'd even met him, and he knew that I'd graduated from the University of California, and he was the one who welcomed me into my adult life, into my life's profession. Now, Bruce O'Neill in those days, he and I used to be we'd be confused for each other. So the old priest would call me Bruce all the time. But the one person who always knew my name was David. David always loved beginnings. And it's part of what made him such a compelling character. His enthusiasm for the future always made him seem young. David was part of the very beginning of this cathedral. When he arrived, when he was 27, as a deacon, there was only one priest on staff here, and the cathedral ended at that third column. And after the third column, there's just a sheet of sheet metal all the way to the 100-foot high, all the way closing off half the cathedral. And there was one bell tower, but not the other bell tower. Even more important, in those days, the cathedral was unknown to the people in the city. And he used to love telling the story that illustrated that. He talked about a cab driver who was driving him and said, "That's a Presbyterian church, and they'll never finish it." David had a hand in bringing into being pretty much everything you see around you right now, even to the candlestick holders. But he's the one who helped to move the altar into the center of the transept. David was the one who designed the vestments that we wear. Bishop Mark is frequently reminding us that David's influence on the liturgy, the worship of this church, influenced churches around the world. And if you look, you can look carefully at this lectern before you go. The inscription on it, David chose the inscription on it. It is "in the beginning," written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Now, as you heard Burns describe, David was the driving force behind starting Cathedral School for Boys, St. Paul's Oakland, and even the National Association of Episcopal Schools. And he accomplished far more than we can outline today. The New York Times columnist David Brooks talks about resume virtues and eulogy virtues. David Forbes had more than enough of both. But I'm going to especially miss the encyclopedic quality of his knowledge about things that really matter to me. On David's last visit to San Francisco, he took me around San Francisco on a wild drive around the city. He was the one who was driving at age 96. And everything we did, we just did in slow motion so everybody would make way for us. I mean, if we were going to do a U-turn on California Street between Jones and Taylor, people made space for us because we were going so slowly. He showed me all the houses he had ever lived in. He took me down to the Lake Street. He showed me this. We stopped at this one point, and it was this ancient-looking apartment building. And he said, "I remember when I was a kid and they were building that," and told me the details of how it came into being. And then he pulled over, and he looked me in the eye, and he said, "Malcolm, I want you to preach at my funeral service." Now, the purpose of that long drive and the lunch that followed was for him to help me with what I'm going to say today. David left us with a kind of puzzle, a mystery that we are all going to solve together. David chose everything in this service. The readings, the hymns, the ritual of the meal that we will soon share. These all include a message addressed individually to each of us. And they articulate the answer to a very simple question. Who will God be for you? What difference will God make in your life and through your actions in the world? Now, I'm only going to make 3 very short points. The first is that we live in a world that is alienated and alienating. We often feel cut off from God. We do not experience things as they actually are. Instead, the world's social construction of reality often makes it difficult for us to perceive the light of God, the light which has shined since the very first day of creation. As it says in the prologue to John, in the beginning was the Word. The light shines in the darkness. The darkness did not overcome it. David, if you knew him at all well, understood darkness. He was acquainted with darkness, and he was profoundly concerned about it. Hatred, conflict, racism, mental illness, sexism, prejudice against gay people, poverty, the desecration of the earth, and so much more. All these issues deeply troubled him. He would be in despair today over the school shootings in Texas. My second point has to do with the image that David gave us for the Good Shepherd. I have to tell you, we read the wrong gospel this afternoon. The right gospel is written in your bulletin. It's about the Good Shepherd. That's what he wanted us to be thinking about. The Good Shepherd is a reminder to us that we always have a choice. We can always decide who will be our master. Now, I know many successful, beautiful, wealthy, brilliant people who are at the same time deeply miserable. They are unhappy because their lives are held in the grip of a relentless and heartless master. They are slaves to the whim of their ego. So in short, we have to choose between our own ego and the Good Shepherd. So what is a Good Shepherd? Now, in high school, I learned quite a lot about sheep because it was Davis, and there's lots of sheep there, and there's 4-H there, and there's an agricultural college. Sheep were pretty much all over the place as I was growing up. And so when the Psalm says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures," I know what that means. And I'll tell you, sheep will only lie down if 4 conditions are met. The first is the sheep needs to be free from fear, free of parasites, free of hunger, and at peace with the other sheep around it. And the Good Shepherd, the shepherd who loves them, is the one who makes this freedom possible. For me, having Jesus as my Good Shepherd makes me more free from fear, more at peace with the people in my life. My last point is that this image of the Good Shepherd in the gospel that we read earlier today too, they both come from Jesus' last meal with his friends. And at that meal, Jesus tells his friends that he gives them a new commandment, that they love one another. The New Testament scholar Herman Wachen emphasizes that this love, which he calls agape, which is the Greek word for it, is not just a personal emotion. Instead, this love is the service that liberates. That's what he calls it, the service that liberates. The response to this love should not be a mystical devotion to Jesus, but just practically, us to love one another. Now, for this reason, David devoted his life to the liberation of all people. And in his 90s, he was serving on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force at a crucial time for the Cathedral School for Boys. And his commitment to those meetings, his creativity, the work that he did was absolutely crucial to the life of the school today. And his comments in the trustee meetings, they were constantly about lifting up students from disadvantaged backgrounds. What will God be for you? And what difference will that make? The congregation here at Grace Cathedral is used to me giving homework in my sermons, and I've never given homework in a funeral sermon in my entire life. I've never crossed that line. But I have something for you to offer. I have homework for each of you. as you leave this place, take the bulletin home with you and spend some time looking at the last hymn that we are going to be singing together. The hymn goes like this. All my hope on God is founded. He doth still my trust renew. Me through change and chance he guideth, only good and only true. God unknown, you alone, call my heart to be thine own. I will always love David. He was such a good listener. He was constantly looking after other people. He made us feel valued, like we mattered, even when we're just the youngest guy at the clergy conference. David was humble, and he lived in a state of constant gratitude, and he had a kind of inner life. And I miss him. I think about him nearly every day. I've been having a tough time lately, and I know I could use his help. No one knows what happens after you die. But for the past few months, as David has been making his farewells to his friends, he's been saying over and over, he said it a couple times to me, see you on the other side. David has been faithful. He has been a good shepherd to us. And I don't know what heaven is, but I imagine it to be like the countryside uphill from the Russian River as it winds through Healdsburg. And I can imagine that as we travel through the vineyards, as we approach the ranch house there, ready for our new beginning, I can imagine David welcoming us and greeting each of us by name.